Welcome to Lesson 6. The issue here is how do we assess competency? In Lesson 3, we saw that some of the most damning information about the U.S. education system has to do with the competency of high school graduates. We saw that competency has gotten worse over time. Certainly this is not good news for any nation. In this lesson, we will focus on who makes these assessments and how they do it. The Program for an International Assessment of Adult Competencies, PIAAC, is a program of assessment and analysis of adult skills. The major survey conducted as a part of their program is the Survey of Adult Skills. The survey measures adults' proficiency in key information processing skills, literacy, numeracy, and problem solving, and gathers information and data on how adults use their skills at home, at work, and in the wider community. This assessment organization operates under the umbrella of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, better known as OECD. OECD is a unique forum where the governments of 36 member states with market economies work with each other, as well as with more than 70 non-member economies to promote economic growth, prosperity, and sustainable development. The videos will show how the tests are graded, putting each student into one of 5 categories. When I describe someone as functionally illiterate or mathematically deficient, it is because their results put them at level 1 or below. Here are 2 videos now to help us better understand assessment. Number 1 introduces us to this organization with emphasis on how Americans measure out, and 2 give the details about who they are and what they do. The first is about 2.5 minutes. The second one is almost 8 minutes. This ends Lesson 6 when these videos are completed.
A new international assessment shows that adults in the U.S. are not keeping up with their international counterparts in the knowledge and skills needed to participate in 21st century society. In fact, U.S. adults scored below the international average in all 3 of the job-related skills measured. The Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, or PIAC, measures and compares the workplace skills of adults in developed countries. In this new assessment, Americans ranked below the international average in literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving skills in digital environments. Out of more than 20 countries, the U.S. scored behind 12 countries in literacy and lower than 18 countries in math skills. Americans were also lagging in using technology to solve problems. The data suggest we need to look at high school graduates to ensure they're prepared to succeed. Americans whose highest level of education was a high school diploma scored 7 points lower in literacy than those who didn't even get as far as a high school diploma in Japan. Some Americans are performing extremely well. 12% of Americans scored at the highest levels, and that's about the same as the international average. But 18% of Americans scored at the lowest level, and 4% failed to even meet that level. Here's a sample assessment question to show what low skills mean in everyday life. Test takers were presented with 4 supermarket price tags. Each tag displayed details such as the product's name, price, weight, and the date the product was packed. They were asked which product was packed first. 10% of Americans could not correctly answer this type of very simple question, which is at below level 1 in numeracy. These results are especially serious for Americans with low skills. Compared with low-skilled adults in other countries, Americans are at a higher risk to have low wages, be jobless, or in poor health. The full PIAC report includes international rankings and details on how U.S. adults performed by age, education level, by race and ethnicity, and by whether they were employed or unemployed. Get the full report here.
Yeah, thank you and welcome. This is a very exciting moment. PIAC is the world's only way to actually look not just what qualifications people have acquired, but what they know and what they can do in key foundations. And I have with me with William Thorne and Marta Encinas Martin, actually the masterminds of the survey and also the key authors of this report. But let me just give you a little bit of background on this survey. It's based on samples. We are not testing everyone in the population. That would be testing 1.15 billion people. But we are drawing randomized samples in the participating countries and basically assess those people directly based on trained interviews who go to the households and administer the measures. And they also collect a lot of important contextual data, trying to understand how people actually use their skills at work and generally in life, and also on the conditions in which they work and live and things like this. The assessment focuses on literacy skills, numeracy, but also looks at to what extent people can solve problems in a kind of technological environment. So, as I already said, it's based on survey samples. We typically survey between 4,500 people to up to 27,300. And then also looked at how people use their skills. What do we mean by literacy? It's reading, but it's more than that. It's basically the ability of people not only to understand, to extract knowledge, but also to reflect on it, to evaluate it, and to show that they can sort of use quite complex material in sort of thoughtful ways. When we talk about numeracy, it's the ability to access, use, interpret, and communicate numerical information, data, numbers, mathematical ideas. It's not sort of the kind of math you know from school, complex formulas and equations. It's more of a practical application of quantitative reasoning. And then problem solving in technology-rich environments. Also, this is not about, coding, advanced computer design. It's basically how we use modern technology to manage information. Opening an Excel spreadsheet, copying material from different sources, integrate different pieces of information, the kind of things that you need to do when you use technology to solve complex. So first question, of course, is, what can adults actually do? In order to help you understand the results, we have grouped basically performance into 5 levels. Adults at level 1 can read very kind of short, clear-cut, basically pieces of information. They can sort of literally read a simple text, complete a simple form, and also sort of this is what you would expect, from a 10-year-old child. Basically, the technical reading skills to just, process very simple information. At level 2, you can already sort of look at, different pieces of information, put them together, compare, contrast, reason about information, also making some very simple inferences and so on. When you talk about level 3, that's where people get quite proficient. That's where we sort of can deal with text structures, rhetorical devices, interpret, evaluate several pieces of information, and so on. And then adults at level 4 and 5, they can actually, use very complex information, interpret it correctly, triangulate different sources of information, the kind of things that you really would want to have in this kind of complex literacy world in which we live today. So let's see how this plays out, actually. What you can see in a country like Japan or Finland or the Netherlands, now there on the top, you can see the vast majority of people is on the good side, at least level 3, very solid foundations, lots of people level 4 and 5. But if you look at the new countries that have joined us, for example, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico at the lower end, you can see it's a tiny minority of people with reasonable or advanced literacy skills, level 3 or above. And you can see the orange bar, literacy skills at level 1 and below is very, very low. So you have a huge share of people in adult populations there who basically are left out of much of the information that they might find on the web or in advanced information sources. So huge differences in the capacity of people to process information across those levels. Let's talk a little bit about numeracy. Again, adults at level 1, these are people who can do very basic numerical operations. Again, what you would learn in the very earliest years of school, At level 2, there adults can perform tasks that require identifying and acting on mathematical information that are embedded already in some quite complex contexts. Level 3, that's where you sort of get quite good levels. That's basically where adults have a good conceptual understanding of mathematical kind of ideas and processes, which they can apply to contexts where this is not so obvious. They can also perform tasks that you need to pursue in multiple steps and so on. And then adults at level 4 and 5, they can really deal with very complex, abstract, or mathematical ideas embedded in contexts that are unfamiliar to them. Okay, let's see how this plays out. And you can see basically the same picture. Now you can see Japan, Finland, also Sweden, Netherlands, vast majority of people actually getting to good and very good levels of proficiency, where again, you look to Ecuador, Peru, Mexico in particular, where you talk about less than 1 in 10 adults having sort of the level of numeracy skills that you need to deal with. Finally, problem solving in technology-rich environments. First of all, we have a group of people who either did not take or did not pass that test. And then you have adults at level 1, complete task in which they can sort of see a very explicit goal and for which they can perform the operations in a single environment that they know. Now again, have a spreadsheet where you add up some numbers and things like this, or open a text and things like this. Whereas in level 2, people can complete problems that have quite explicit criteria for success, where you have to triangulate maybe multiple applications, use several steps, and so on. And then adults at level 3 who can complete tasks that involve multiple applications, a large number of steps, also where you have to resolve problems. Something unexpected happens, you open up something and you see something that you didn't expect. You have to resolve small problems and so on. But what I wanted to show you just is that level 2 and 3 is not rocket science. It's basically, opening your computer and dealing with standard applications in a reasonably sophisticated way. So level 2 and 3 is probably what you would expect every adult to have in a